I just got some random stuff for y'all this evening. Uh, got like five things. First thing we're gonna start off with this here from believe it's Long Crime Investigates. Missing Indiana teen found buried in her boss's backyard. Let's go.
What happened to Valerie? Strangled her. With what? Bell?
In the quiet town of Arlington, Indiana, a horrific crime unfolds that chills the entire community to the bone.
She was trying to propose it. She thought she was going to seduce me and it wasn't going to happen. She knew she wasn't going to black me.
A young life extinguished. 17-year-old Valerie Tyndall vanishes without a trace, only to be found buried in a makeshift coffin. The perpetrator, none other than her employer and neighbor, 59-year-old Patrick Scott.
What happened to Valerie? I got carried away. Was she struggling with her strangler? Yeah.
But the depths of deception reveal more than food. They uncover a disgusting attempt at a justification for murder.
She tried to blackmail me to buy her a car. And she got carried away. Have you and Valerie been in a sexual relationship?
As we peel back the layers of this dark tale, one question lingers. How can someone turn from a neighbor to predator right before your eyes?
You might see one word, or one question. What happened to Valerie?
Valerie Tyndall, a 17-year-old student at Rushville Consolidated High School, was known for her infectious smile, love for video games, singing, and spending time with loved ones. She had a passion for animals and aspired to be a veterinarian. It's in the quaint town of Arlington, Indiana, that her parents, Sheena Sanford and Jack Tyndall, sought refuge from the harsher realities of city life. The Tyndall family, drawn to Arlington's promise of peace, found more than just a home. They also found themselves trapped in a nightmare where they couldn't wake up. Patrick Scott, the Tyndall's neighbor from across the street, owned a local lawn care business in Maplewood. Scott appeared to be the epitome of a helpful neighbor, quickly forming a bond with them that resulted in him offering Valerie, then just 15, a job. She became his employee, and he became her mentor. On Wednesday, June 7th, 2023, Valerie left word that she would be at work. Her mother, Sheena, thought this was odd, as Valerie doesn't normally work on Wednesdays. Sheena brushes off her initial concern, assuming Valerie might be with friends or maybe at work. She called Patrick Scott, and when he said that Valerie did not show up for work, her worry turned into all-out panic. Her nightmare was just beginning. As Valerie's mom continued to try to pinpoint her daughter's whereabouts, she faced an ever-shifting narrative from her friend and neighbor, Patrick Scott. A key detail emerges when one of Scott's clients mentioned overhearing plans for a lunch meeting between him and Valerie. This new lead prompted Valerie's mother to contact authorities immediately.
Rush County Sheriff's Department
Well, let me make sure I got this on.
It's a 17-year-old.
Okay, good, I got it.
Arlington, Indiana.
The Rush County Sheriff's Office treated Valerie's case with seriousness from the outset. As they would do if she was a runaway, they swiftly executed warrants on social media platforms, phone providers, and bank accounts to track her potential movements. Although she had not run away, the data obtained by investigators would become crucial in learning Valerie's fate. For the next 5 months, Sheena and Jack endured appearance worse. As Valerie's 18th birthday passed on August 29th, the agony of not knowing what happened to her took its toll. Did she run away? The details of her disappearance, what led to it, and the words from the person responsible would only add to the pain. On the day she disappeared, it turns out that Valerie was with Patrick Scott in his home across the street from where she lived. There was an argument. It escalated, and in a moment of unfathomable violence, Patrick Scott strangles Valerie with his belt. Scott then wraps her in black plastic and leaves her body in his home office. Returning to his family in the main part of his home to go about his evening. The next day, he reportedly constructed a wooden box in which he placed her body and screwed it shut. Scott then wheeled Valerie's body to another part of his property, where he buried her, less than 100 yards from her own home. The search for Valerie Tyndall, spearheaded by the Rushville Police Department, Shelby County Sheriffs, and United States Marshals, was an extensive operation that spanned across hundreds of acres across the area. This concerted effort involved meticulous searches in remote locations, guided by the digital footprints left by a phone Scott had bought for Valerie. Each geolocation acting as a beacon, drawing law enforcement closer to uncovering her fate. Amidst their rigorous search, a photo of Valerie posted on social media the day she disappeared caught their attention. In it, her vibrant flowing hair and boundless youthful energy painted a picture of a life full of potential tragically cut short. Yet, the distinctive orange fingernails, a small but striking detail, would emerge as a vital piece of the puzzle in unraveling the mystery of disappearance. While Valerie's parents yearned for answers, Patrick Scott continued to play the role of trusted friend and neighbor, and a devoted husband and father to his own family. But detectives began to detect deception, revealing a monstrous betrayal hidden beneath the facades of stern camaraderie. From the outset, the Rush County Sheriff's Office identified Scott as a person of interest. However, the investigation was complicated by Scott's landscaping business, which granted him access to numerous remote locations. In response, the Sheriff's Office secured and carried out over 50 search warrants. Investigators brought cadaver dogs to a property in a pond close to Scott's house. The dogs signaled the presence of human remains in the water. This led investigators to conduct an aerial survey of Scott's properties, which revealed multiple areas of disturbed ground. On November 28, 2023, almost 6 months after Valerie Tyndall vanished, law enforcement carried out simultaneous search warrants on several properties across the region, including Scott's home and an adjacent property here. An excavation revealed disturbances in the soil, leading to the discovery of 2 closely situated boxes. One of these, buried deeply, held Valerie's remains, identifiable by the orange nail polish she had on her hands the day she went missing. Scott, under constant surveillance during the execution of the search warrants, was taken into custody without incident, subsequently admitted to the murder. In the wake of this tragedy, Valerie's family grapples with the why of it. The interrogation of Patrick Scott offers a chilling glimpse into the depths of human depravity.
So, Patrick, over the last 5 months, you and I have gotten to know each other, correct? Correct? You see me a lot, right? And every time we talk, it's we get along with it, right? We talk, right? Everybody knows you talk, right?
In the initial phase of the interrogation, the officer employs a common tactic of rapport building with Patrick Scott by engaging in small talk, offering a drink of water, and referring to previous.
But why did he do it though?
Familiarity and understanding. By adopting a conversational tone, the officer sets the stage for a more cooperative interview and places Scott in a mental state more conducive to sharing information.
So, here's the deal tonight. Now, I normally don't do this. Here's how I'm going to do this. I'm going to tell you, because here's why. You know, I've played off like 8 million things right here. As you come and sit in this room, your mind plays tricks on you as an officer, alright? And it tells you to go all these different directions and try all this different stuff. But the fact of the matter is that I think you're overall probably a pretty good person, okay? If I didn't, I would have treated you probably different over the time, alright? I'm just going to talk to you like a person, alright? And then there's times like you sit in this interview room and maybe that didn't happen in the past, alright? But the fact of the matter is that the natural human thing is when you do something wrong, you want to tell us you did something wrong, okay? So what I make the decision of when I walk through that door right there was, I would like to talk to you again, and I would like you to tell me what happened about it. That's the end result of what I want to know, okay? But here's what's weird about that. I'm going to tell you everything I know, okay? Because here's the deal. In the end, I believe you've done something about it. I believe you've done something about it, and we're going to prove it, all right? But what I want to know is the why. And what you want to tell me is, I'm sitting here watching you tear up right now. You want to tell me. Okay?
Next dramatically, the officer moves to direct accusation, confronting Scott with the undeniable fact that Valerie was last seen in heaven. It's a jolt to the system, designed to shake loose the truth. By explicitly stating their knowledge of his actions on June 7th, the officer strips away any ambiguity and places the burden of explanation squarely on Scott's shoulders.
5 months ago, June 7th, Valerie was, and the June 7th when that day we know Valerie was working. Admit it, told us that. But on June 7th, you drove Valerie all the way back to your residence, okay? And you arrived at your residence at 12:59 p.m., okay? And then between 12:59 and roughly 4 o'clock, something happened. And our job was to go to the happened and try to figure out what happened. And as the investigation unfolded, that led us to today, in which we found the box, Valerie's body, behind the shed. Because we have her in the box, okay? Wrapped up multiple times, picked up in the box, the OSB, the 2x4s that you bought, next to the box that we talked to you earlier about, that had the porn videos in it. And had the porn videos in it. We got her in the box next. You know we have found it. And I didn't want to bluff you on that. I wouldn't do that. Because you're sitting here tearing up on the cry, right? So, I'm going to read you your rights. This is the opportunity for you to explain your rights.
There's palpable tension in the room. Scott is now fully aware that the officers have significant evidence against him, narrowing his avenues for denial or evasion. This tactic forces Scott into a corner, where his only recourse is to engage with the officer's questions more earnestly. The officer's skillful application of pressure here is a pivotal move, setting the stage for deeper revelations.
Okay, and that's my question to you before we go any further. Why did they pick up Linda?
We're going to talk to her too. She lives on the property. We're going to talk to Linda as well. Because everybody we know what happened to her. We both live on the property. So we have to talk to everybody on the property. Does that make sense? But I'm giving you an opportunity to explain to me. The other thing is that there's family involved. There's mistakes that's been made. Okay? I sit across a lot of people. Okay? And the day one I sit across, the times I've sit across from you, you remind me of a common man that goes to work, works his butt off. It is family man loves family. That's what I get. Okay?
In this crucial phase of the interrogation, the officer employs a deeply humanizing tactic by invoking the pain and loss experienced by Valerie's family. This approach, known as the sympathy, aims to tap into any latent sense of empathy or remorse within Patrick Scott. By highlighting the anguish of Valerie's loved ones and the irrevocable mistakes that have been made, the officer attempts to break through Scott's defensive barrier, appealing to his conscience and sense of humanity.
I could have come in here and said, Patrick, you know why I'm going to talk to you? So that's the common thing. And that was the first thought in my head that I was going to do to you. And then I said, no. Because I didn't deep down you love Valerie, and I know you love your family. Okay? So I decided that when I come in that door, just now, that I'm giving you an opportunity to explain why. Patrick, today's the day. Family deserves this food.
What happened?
You deserve this closure because this has painted you. We can tell it every time we talk about it. Explain to me what happened about it and explain to me why. Because we deserve it and everybody else deserves it as well.
The impact of this tactic is multifaceted. On one hand, it serves to remind Scott of the real-world consequences of his actions, potentially stirring feelings of guilt or regret that may have been suppressed or ignored. On the other hand, it strategically positions the officer as someone who seeks not just justice, but understanding and closure for everyone affected by the tragedy. The result of this sympathy play is a subtle but powerful shift in the dynamic of the interrogation, creating an environment where Scott might feel more compelled to open up, not out of legal obligation, but from a moral and emotional imperative.
What happened about it?
Oh, I got carried away.
Who won?
Huh?
You won.
You know what?
Just lay out to what happened.
She took the back wheel in the binder of the car.
Good. Then what happened?
She thought she was going to seduce me and it wasn't going to happen. And she got carried away.
Well, explain that to me. What's that mean? Does Linda know about it?
Nobody knows.
She just tell me what happened.
She tried to seduce me and I wasn't going to happen.
Well, what happened to Valerie? That's where you stop. What's new to her?
Yeah.
This dude here sounds like he groomed that child. And yes, even though she was 17 and he's the age he is, this girl is still a child.
Sir now emphasizes the critical nature of the moment, presenting Scott with a now or never choice. This tactic instills a sense of urgency, framing Scott's confession as not just inevitable, but as a necessary step for his own liberation, combining the pressure of the ticking clock with the promise of a final, cathartic release.
What I do, sir?
What's new, sir? Tell us what you did, sir. With what?
Well,
And then what did you do?
I moved her into the office
How long was she in there?
the next day.
What did, where's the bell at? You left her in the office till the next day. Then what?
Till I got home the next day, I just made that box.
What about the hole?
The hole was already done. But he wasn't dramatic because I was so confident so concrete.
So you strangled her. What room were you in when you strangled her?
Back there by my bed there.
So you said she tried to seduce you with a car. Explain to me the rock out.
She was going to come on to me.
Did she say she was going to get you in trouble, or?
Yeah, she was going to tell everybody that I would make a move for her. And I wasn't going to have it.
Okay.
Just things got out of easy.
Where'd the belt come from?
It was mine, I had it on.
You got it on. Okay. So explain to me what happened there in that room. Like, how did you get the belt on her?
I was fighting her off. I took her, put her around her.
Why were you guys fighting?
She was trying to take the clothes off.
Okay.
And it wasn't going to do it.
Okay. And then you guys got in a fight?
Yeah, so pushing and shoving right there.
Okay.
This dude's lying.
Your belt. And then what happened?
I took
This
her
dude's
in
lying.
till she quit.
And what did you do afterwards? What?
Here's what I believe happened. I believe that he tried to grape this girl and she fought back and he choked her out and unalived her. That's what I believe happened. But let's
What was
continue.
going through your head at that time?
What's doing?
What was your first thing about it? What was your first, like, what were you thinking about?
Trying to figure out what to do.
And how long did we hold that? Did you ballpark how long you held the belt?
On her,
Yeah.
she quit moving.
Did you know she was dead then?
For much different so.
And so you put her in the office, and then the next day you built the box. Where'd you build the box at?
Backyard.
Good. And then when did you put her in the box?
That same day I built it. I didn't say nothing. You knew she was going to black me.
because of blackmail, was that your intention to kill her? Avoid blackmail?
I'm telling everybody that I had my way with it. That's never happened.
So, then, was that your plan? Like, if you weren't going to be blackmailed, right?
Right.
So was that the reason, was that the plan to kill her?
No, that just kind of happened.
Because she was going to blackmail.
Yeah.
Blending tactical skill and psychological insight to navigate Scott's defenses, they ultimately got the concussion and were able to provide the family and community with much needed closure.
So you're going to be charged with murder, right? I assume you already knew that, correct? Alright, but in the end here, I do think, like, everything I said was true. Okay? Everything I said to you was true. Okay, when I started talking to you, everything I said was true. Alright? I do think it was the best situation here is that you finally came out. And in the end, I think you are going to be happy that you came out. Okay? That makes sense? Okay. Alright. Stand up, I'll tell you back on you, okay?
Ultimately, Patrick Scott agreed to a plea deal, resulting in a 57-year prison sentence.
As a president, that's all he got.
There was a hole there. We thought she was out there somewhere. There was a hole in it. Never gonna be killed. Just like half your family's gone.
Although she's not been charged in connection to this case, Valerie's parents believe that Linda Scott, Patrick's wife, knew Valerie was murdered.
My name was the first week. Right up to the flyers. And then day two, we went out and hung flyers. And as soon as we come home, they were there. And they kept coming over, you know, and asking me if I was okay and telling us, I'm sure she's fine. She'll be back home.
I don't know how Spike can do anything like this. He's a monster. He's the right one to be prosecuted with it. She knew everything about it too, I'm sure.
I honestly believe this whole thing in my head.
A deeper look at the nature of Scott's relationship with Valerie shed light on his outrageous attempts to justify the murder with claims of blackmail and seduction. Unbeknownst to her parents, beyond paying her as an employee, Scott had been providing Valerie with money, food, gas, and even took her on trips.
She's like real busy boys. She didn't know on the internet. And I tried to get her to stop doing that. It's dangerous. And it's been work. Come to find out it was the boss. The boys.
Unfortunately, I was right.
Valerie's story, no heartbreak, serves as a call to action for families to maintain open lines of communication with their children about the risks they may face even in familiar surroundings. The tragic circumstances of Valerie's murder underlines the reality that dangers can and do exist close to home. Be vigilant about your children's whereabouts and the people within your circle. Sometimes, the most dangerous predators are the ones you already know.
All right. That's the end of that. Second thing we have here is from Coffee House Crime and is entitled OnlyFans to Murder, the wannabe model who snapped with revenge. Let's get into it.
This is Chelsea Perkins, a US Coast Guard veteran, better known as Selena Savage. On the surface, Chelsea seemed like a woman with an unusual path. A former service member turned mother and then, eventually, OnlyFans model. And whether you agree with her lifestyle or not, she knew exactly how to captivate an audience and how to hide her darkest secrets hidden in plain sight. However, behind that carefully crafted image lurked something that was far more sinister, including a festering obsession, a plan for revenge, and blood spilled on federal grounds. Unfortunately, that is where Matthew Dunmeyer enters the story. A man who was not only a beloved friend and father, but also someone who had his own shadowy past. Whatever lay between these two, and whatever messy history they shared, it would ultimately create a monster in Chelsea. And not only would her actions result in multiple deaths, but it would also force long-forgotten secrets right back into the spotlight. Hi there folks, my name is Adrian, and welcome back to Coffee House Crime. And today is one of a story for you. This one has got everything your mother warned you about. A military veteran turned OnlyFans model, a secret revenge plot that had been brewing for years, and a murder in a national park. Oh, and also a Facebook post that basically gave the entire story away before it even happened. So top up your coffee, silence that phone, and maybe lock your front doors for good measure. On that note, please grab yourself a coffee, and let's caffeinate while we investigate. This is the case of Selena Savage. Welcome to Ohio, folks. Today, we begin in the city of Hudson, and with a man named Matthew. Matthew Dunmire was, in many ways, your typical Ohio guy. At the age of 31, he was a free spirit, someone who loved music, played guitar, and cherished time with his friends. Originally from Virginia, those who knew Matthew described him as selfless, loyal to a fault, and always the first to lend a hand when someone needed help. Born on November the 26th, 1989, to his mother, Tommy Lynn, Matthew was just a happy and cheerful boy. He was goofy, loved listening to Frank Zappa with his father, and found his guitar at a very young age. He also shared a deep bond with a circle of friends, most of whom were just as passionate about music as he was, and moving into his adulthood with a long-term partner, 2 kids, and a solid crew he saw almost every day, well, Matthew seemed happily grounded in a small town just outside of Hudson, Ohio. Which is why, when he suddenly stopped responding to all text messages and didn't show up like he usually would, people knew that something was wrong. On the morning of March the 6th, 2021, Matthew disappeared under abnormal conditions. However, the real story began the evening before, on March the 5th. It was over drinks at the Tiki Underground, a local bar that he would often go to with his friends and co-workers, that Matthew said that he had plans for the weekend. He explained that a friend from Virginia was passing through Ohio, and so the two had decided to catch up. But rather than meet for dinner or coffee, they instead booked an Airbnb 40 miles north of Hudson, where they planned to spend the night together and then take a walk the following day. At around 6 p.m. that evening, and while still sharing a drink with friends, Matthew's phone lit up with a text message. He glanced down and then looked up and said to his friends that a so-called girl he knew online was here. That is when he stood up, grabbed his coat, and made his way outside. Wanting to be polite, his supervisor followed him, stepping outside to say goodbye for the weekend. The two exchanged a few words outside before then shaking hands. Meanwhile, his supervisor noticed a white smart car idling in the parking lot, its rear lights glowing in the dusky darkness. The car was for Matthew, and behind the wheel was a woman with brown hair. His supervisor couldn't make out much else, but Matthew did appear to be happy when he saw her. He then waved goodbye to his supervisor, got into the passenger seat, and then, just like that, the car pulled away, heading north along Akron-Cleveland Road and towards the big city. Now, at the time, it did seem like this was just another farewell. However, little did his supervisor know that he would be the last of Matthew's loved ones to ever see him alive.
Then obviously there's the ice retention test, which everybody loves doing, is how long will the cooler hold ice? Oh!
Matthew's loved ones to ever see him alive. Although
Sorry. There we go.
Although Matthew remained reachable that evening and even into the next morning, his messages would eventually stop. In fact, his final message was sent at 10:29 to his girlfriend, simply saying, "Okay, I'll see you in a little while." Wherever Matthew was at that moment in time, it is clear that he intended to return home later that day. But the thing is, he never did. He didn't reply, didn't call, and never came back. As the day wore on, his girlfriend, who, by the way, was already upset with him, grew concerned. I mean, Matt wasn't responding to any of her messages. But now, his friends were also saying that they couldn't get a hold of him either. And by the next day, well, that concern grew into fear. This was not like Matt at all. I mean, he had 2 kids at home after all, and all of those who knew him knew that he would not leave them hanging. Now, obviously, it is quite safe to say that his colleagues were already quite curious about this mysterious woman. I mean, it's not normal to go out of town with an old friend and then never return. And there were many questions on to why he was doing this in the first place. And now, his friends, they were openly alarmed. Who was she? And more urgently, what happened after she picked Matthew up? This mysterious woman's name was Chelsea Perkins, and it turns out that she was a high school friend of Matthew's back when he lived in Virginia. It's unclear how close the two of them were back then, but what we do know is that the two did in fact know each other, and their connection would prove to be pivotal only several years later. After graduating in the year 2009, Chelsea made a decisive move to enlist into the US Coast Guard. By the age of 19, she was stationed at Coast Guard Station Houston in Texas, where she worked as a small boat crew member and held the rank of seaman. Her military service was rather short-lived, however, lasting only 3 years until her departure in March of 2012. But it turns out that her time there would not be entirely fruitless, because while in the US Coast Guard, she met and then eventually fell in love with a fellow service member. The couple married a couple of years later, before then having 2 children and settling down in Northern Virginia. So far so good, and to the outside world, it seemed like a stable and respectable life. But behind closed doors, and soon to be very public, Chelsea's lifestyle was transforming into something that no uniform could contain. And by no uniform, I mean quite literally no uniform, because Chelsea had made the decision to become an OnlyFans model. Now look, can I be really honest with you here for a minute, but do you know how hard it is to try and research an OnlyFans model without it getting a little bit risky? All I wanted was a bit of historical background and maybe a few pictures of her face. But Chelsea, she definitely had other ideas. So let's just say that now my eyeballs are in therapy, and my search history needs a priest. To put this another way, after leaving the military, Chelsea did a full career pivot into the adult entertainment industry, rebranding herself as a porn model under the name Selena Savage. Now listen guys, I know you're curious, but don't go typing that name into Google. I'm serious, and I'm watching you. Focusing on the more PG-friendly version of Chelsea, she still has an active Instagram account under the name of Selena Savage Official, where she would previously promote her, content and other various life updates. From there, you can see that she likes motorbikes, hairless cats, and tattoos. And despite now operating in a very different world from the military, it does look like that she managed to leverage her online persona into a new source of income and attention. By early 2021, and at the same time that Matthew disappeared, she was a wife and a mother of 2 children, while online, she went by the name of Selena Savage. Friends and those who knew Chelsea described her as a very expressive person, who at times had somewhat of a bad behavioral reputation. A former classmate of hers from the Coast Guard described her as insane, while another former shipmate of hers described her as bizarre. However, it is important to note here that, at the time, she had no recorded criminal incidents and no violent behavior on record before the year 2021. There is no known prior criminal history here, no arrests, no charges, and no civil lawsuits. It appears that after Matthew moved away from Virginia and to Ohio, he and Chelsea slowly drifted apart. Their connection, for whatever it once was, faded. That would be until a brief encounter in the year 2017. Now, we will get to the significance of that encounter soon. But for now, it's worth realizing that from that point onwards, they stopped speaking altogether. 4 years passed, and then in February of 2021, that changed yet again. During the icy stretch of that winter, Chelsea decided to add Matthew back on Facebook. It was a move that seemed casual and maybe even a little nostalgic. The two began to talk, and Chelsea mentioned to Matthew that she had plans to travel through Cleveland in only a few days' time. She told him that she was heading northwest of Detroit for a tattoo appointment, and since she would be in the area, well, they should catch up. Matthew agreed. I mean, sure, why not? It sounded simple enough. Just 2 old acquaintances reconnecting for the weekend. But of course, that weekend would be the last time that anyone ever saw him alive. While both friends and co-workers knew that he was meeting someone, either an old friend or a woman that he'd met online, nobody actually knew her name. There were no contact details to remember, and no ways to trace him or his friend. And so, when Matthew stopped responding, well, panic began to set in. And then he was officially reported as missing. But of course, with no leads and no trail to follow, nobody had any idea where he had gone. That would be until only 3 days later.
Today, I'm going to show you a tool that will be a game changer for a lot of beginners out there. And the secret? AI.
At 11 a.m. on March the 9th, 2021, officers from the Valley View Police Department were dispatched to the Terra Vista Natural Reserve the area inside Cuyahoga Valley National Park. Hikers had stumbled upon a very gruesome discovery. Just off the trail and near an old cemetery, they found the body of a young adult male. The victim appeared to be dressed in all black, wearing fingerless gloves, a leather jacket, a hoodie, jeans and boots. Lying beside him was a half-empty bottle of Aquafina, and inside his pocket, officers found his ID, which sadly would confirm that it was Matthew Dunmire. Although his body was then prepared for autopsy, it was already obvious what had killed him. Officers observed a single gunshot wound to the back of his head, therefore ruling that this was a homicide and likely not in self-defense. When his family and friends learned of the news, that grief was sure to hit hard, and the sadness rippled through his community. But no one took it harder than his mother, Tommy Lynn, who quite clearly was shattered more than anyone realized. And trust me, there is more to this story coming up. As the reality of his death started to sink in, attention quickly turned to that mysterious woman. The one that he'd told everybody that he was with that weekend. Everyone who heard about her had the same burning questions. Who was she? Why was Matthew at the cemetery with her? And what happened between them? Now, at that point in time, nobody had the answers, but thankfully, the FBI were just about to get involved. And when they did, and eventually solved the case, let me tell you, they were surprised. But before we get there, let's first talk a little bit more about Chelsea, because it's not like an old friend would have a motive for murder, right? Well, sadly, wrong. In 2017, Chelsea went to the police with a very disturbing claim. She reported that Matthew had sexually assaulted her and that she wanted to press charges. Now, the details surrounding this allegation are still unclear to this day, but it does seem that the authorities investigated her claim and ultimately determined that there was not enough evidence to pursue charges, not even circumstantially. Not to say that it didn't happen, of course, but officers found nothing. Needless to say, Matthew denied the allegation, and not just in passing either, because those close to him say that he was utterly stunned, shaken, and horrified by the accusation. He claimed that it was entirely consensual, and that she must be lying for her own benefit. His friends were also shocked by the news. They described him as a gentle and laid-back man, the kind of guy who wouldn't hurt a fly. So, what really happened? The truth is that we don't know, and we never will. But what we can say is that moment clearly stuck with Chelsea. It lingered and festered, and those close to her would later say that she could never move past this incident. They say that she was haunted by the belief that Matthew had gotten away with something terrible. So, despite it initially sounding like an outrageous leap, it turns out that Chelsea did actually have a motive after all. Beneath the surface of their messy encounter lay a resentment that never really died. But here is the $1 million question. Could the FBI prove it? Well, as it turns out, yes, and the evidence amounts to laughable levels. On the evening of March the 5th, and at 5:46 p.m., security cameras at an Ohio Turnpike toll plaza caught a glimpse of something interesting, that being a white smart car slipping through the Akron exit. Now, if you're from the area, you will know that this leads towards the Tiki Underground Bar, which is precisely where Matthew just happened to be that night. Only a few minutes later, at 6 p.m., Matthew got that text message. He then turned to his co-workers, said goodbye, and stepped outside with his supervisor. The supervisor would later tell the investigators that he watched Matthew climb into a small white or silver car, which seemed to be driven by a woman with brown hair. The bar's surveillance cameras would later confirm this, and for those still wondering if this really was Chelsea, well, license plate trackers would later match the car to her husband, who, out of respect, will have his identity kept private. About 15 minutes later, and just down the road at a BP gas station, that same small white car would show up on another surveillance camera. Only a few seconds later, Matthew was seen stepping inside to buy cigarettes, a red canned drink, and a bottle of Aquafina, which, as we know, would later become crucial evidence to this case. Multiple surveillance cameras, license plate readers, and GPS data would all confirm that the two then headed north together, eventually arriving at an Airbnb located on Ashbury Avenue on the eastern side of Cleveland, Ohio. The Airbnb in question was reserved under the name of Chelsea Perkins, with a credit card under her name also being used. Not subtle at all, eh? Later that evening, a surveillance camera from a Verizon store showed the two entering a Potbelly sandwich shop together. After that, the two then headed back to their Airbnb, with the nearby cell towers holding a consistent record of the two of them. The following morning, at 9:03 a.m., Matthew texted his girlfriend to say, "I'm guessing you don't miss me, and I bet you're mad with me. I pissed this chick off anyway, so I hope you're happy." At 11:09 a.m., he then pulled up Google Maps and typed in directions to the Terra Vista Natural Study Area, a quiet pocket of trails which are tucked away inside Cuyahoga Valley National Park, and by 9:45 a.m., GPS data confirmed that he had arrived. Cell towers would also confirm that Chelsea was there too, with her device pinging off a cell tower at 9:59 a.m. While nobody can say for sure what precisely happened between the two under that canopy of trees, what we do know is that at 10:29 a.m., Matthew sent a final text message to his girlfriend, simply reading, "Okay, I'll see you in a little while," except he wouldn't, because not long after that, Matthew vanished for good. Chelsea and Matthew may have remained in privacy visually, but only a couple of minutes later, a couple heard a gunshot echoing through the trees. Fearing for their safety, they turned around and darted towards the car park, and when they eventually got there, what do you think they saw? It was Chelsea's white smart car. Only a few minutes later, another couple who were completely unaware of the commotion arrived at the car park, and once they got out of the car and walked up the trail, they saw Chelsea near the cemetery, which, by the way, was pretty much exactly where Matthew's body was found. So now, there wasn't just 2 but 4 people that could now pin Chelsea at the exact time and place that Matthew was murdered. However, this is where it gets really interesting. Do you remember that bottle of water that Matthew bought at the gas station? Well, it turns out that he'd actually brought that with him to the cemetery, with investigators later finding it next to his body, and when they tested it, they found that it contained both Matthew's and Chelsea's DNA. And if you think that's bad enough, well, it only gets worse, because her DNA wasn't only found on that bottle, but also under his fingernails and all over his pubic hair. So, I guess you could say it's the physical evidence that really turned heads. It is also worth highlighting here that the bullet found in the back of Matthew's skull was a 9mm
Wait a minute,
round.
execution
The gun that was
style?
licensed underneath Chelsea's name was a 9mm Springfield Armory. Are you ready?
Got ready to do the execution style.
Underneath Chelsea's name was a 9mm Springfield Armory. So, what did Chelsea do after Matthew was gone? Well, the road keeps talking, and it turns out that she really did go to that tattoo parlor. Turnpike Easy Pass records show that she was traveling northbound by 1 p.m. She then slipped onto the Ohio Turnpike at North Ridgeville and then headed west, straight towards Toledo. From Toledo, she then crossed state lines into Michigan, before then eventually arriving at Family Inc. And while Matthew's body lay lifeless in the park, Chelsea celebrated by getting herself a brand new tattoo, kind of like a trophy after her horrific actions. She would even talk about it on Instagram, posting a photo with the caption, "What a great weekend. I got a little blast from the babe in her sick-ass new shop. So proud." And yes, by the way, it does mean that this picture of Chelsea was taken only hours after she murdered another human. The following day, more surveillance cameras and plate checkers would track her driving all the way back home, before then carrying on with her life as if nothing had happened. But fast forward to the end of the month on March the 30th, investigators were done playing nice, and that is when they showed up at Chelsea's home in Arlington with a search warrant in hand. Thankfully, what they found inside was all they had hoped for, because hidden away in the backpack was a Springfield Armory 9mm pistol with her ID card right beside it. Forensic experts then compared the bullet pulled from Matthew's skull to rounds fired from Chelsea's handgun, and the markings left behind were so eerily similar to the fatal bullet that it was impossible to ignore. Oh, and by the way, here is something that I almost forgot to point out. But only 3 days before the murder, Chelsea jumped on Facebook and posted, "Dead men tell no tale." I mean, that is a little too on the nose if you ask me. And guess what? That was actually posted on the same day that she reconnected with Matthew. So now, the police had, well, pretty much everything you'd expect in a rock-solid case. Of course, that being multiple witnesses, DNA, a murder weapon, and a motive far darker than most people could stomach. However, despite having all of that stacked against her, the detectives hesitated to arrest her. Maybe they were just being cautious, or maybe they wanted more time. The bottom line is, though, that for now, Chelsea walked free. And this is where our story twists and turns into a very bizarre nightmare. Matthew's mother, Tommy Lynn, was consumed by grief because, well, her son was dead. Yet, with every day that passed, she knew that his killer was out there somewhere living their best life. And so, when the police hesitated to arrest the person they believed murdered her son, Tommy Lynn flipped out, and instead she decided that she would take justice into her own hands. So, this is when Tommy decided to launch her own investigation instead. However, as Tommy dug deeper into her son's case, her mental health slowly began to unravel. She eventually convinced herself that it must be one of Matt's ex-girlfriends that was behind his murder. And to be fair, she was half right. But this burden of trying to uncover the truth would slowly begin to consume her. Sleepless nights turned into her new normal, and she spent countless hours poring over every scrap of evidence, chasing leads, and replaying what-ifs in her mind. The deeper she went, the more isolated she became. Friends started to drift away, and the family worried that they couldn't reach her. Her obsession with solving her son's case slowly eclipsed everything, until one day, that obsession turned into a plan far more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. Together, and with her husband, she planned an act of revenge so desperate that it barely felt real. She purchased a fake UPS uniform, loaded up the family car, and then drove all the way to Washington, D.C., to what they believed was Matthew's killer's doorstep. When Tommy knocked on that front door, her hands were trembling so violently that she could barely keep her grip on the gun, which was hidden underneath her delivery jacket. She had now made up her mind. The woman who killed her son would now have to pay with blood, and that came at the cost of 2 bullets to the stomach. But fate, or maybe just a cruel twist of tragedy, seemed to have other plans instead, because that woman who opened the front door, that was not Chelsea Perkins, not even close. And although she may have had some faint resemblance towards Chelsea, she was a completely innocent stranger, and someone who had no connection in Matthew's death. Tommy Lynn had made a terrible mistake and had shot the wrong person. And now, with a gun in her hand and in a stranger's hallway, her revenge came crashing down around her. Matthew's mother then fled the scene, and of course the police were right behind her, but unfortunately it was already too late. Tommy Lynn was convinced that there was no way out of this, and so she did the unthinkable. She grabbed her gun, raised it to her head, and then pulled the trigger. In an instant, the Dunmire family lost not just a son, but a mother too, a second life that was swallowed by the same darkness that started it all. And as for Chelsea, well, her story wasn't finished yet. Although she carried on as if nothing had happened, posting on Instagram in her skimpy outfits, and in other outfits like this, she was now on borrowed time. On December the 9th of 2021, Chelsea was finally arrested on suspicion of murder. Neighbors watched from behind curtains as she was led away in handcuffs, apparently looking just as stone-faced and silent as she did at the cemetery. Down at the station, detectives finally interviewed her. They laid out the facts, including the smart car, the gas station water bottle, the DNA found on Matthew, and the wallet that matched so perfectly. However, Chelsea decided to stick to her story, and denied any involvement whatsoever. She swore that she did not kill Matthew, and that she couldn't explain her DNA which was found on his body. Many of her friends were shocked by the news. I mean, Chelsea openly hated Matthew, sure, but murder?
HPE Virtualization Solutions let you break free from vendor lock-in with a unified approach to VMware, Kubernetes, AWS, Azure, and more. Unshackle your workloads with a hybrid cloud operations strategy. Staying nearby gets you close to what matters most. Seize the days at over 1,500 locations.
But murder? That was a surprise. There were no major red flags. She had no criminal record and no history of violence, and hadn't been diagnosed with anything either. On paper, she did appear to be a stable person, even if that did include her double life as Selena Savage. And now that I think about it, the surname really did not work in her favor. Detectives were convinced this would be an easy open and shut case. After all, Chelsea didn't just snap in an undocumented fashion. She planned every step. She booked an Airbnb, drove more than 300 miles to meet him, and then even scheduled a tattoo appointment for after the murder. To investigators, it all pointed towards one thing: cold-blooded, premeditated murder. After being arrested, Chelsea was ultimately denied bail, meaning she had no choice but to sit in a jail cell until her trial. But before that would begin, the prosecution offered her a deal, a sentence of 27 to 31 years behind bars, if she were to admit to murdering Matthew. If Chelsea had taken this offer, then she would be free again by the time she turned 65. However, she would ultimately refuse this plea deal and then stand by her own story, but only for a short while. Because eventually she had a change of heart, and on May the 27th, 2025, Chelsea Perkins pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, unfortunately excluding first degree. It's interesting, but if the court accepts this plea agreement, then she will spend 20 to 25 years behind bars, which actually is a 25% cut to the first plea deal that she rejected. Now, if I had to hazard a guess, I would probably say that Chelsea realized that the evidence was simply so strong that there was no way she would win this. So I've known about this story for probably 3 weeks now, and if I'm honest with you, every time I think about it, it just stops me dead in my tracks. From Coast Guard to OnlyFans murder,
Okay, we're
to
back.
convicted killer. It's just absolutely crazy. And if that wasn't enough already,
Okay,
throw
this one's
Tommy Lee's
almost
Revenge
done.
and then Dead into the mix. Well, now you've got a script that even Hollywood would call a bit much. Chelsea has always maintained that the main motive was revenge, which, okay, fair enough. Maybe not to that degree, but still, fair enough. But I can't be the only one thinking this. Why did she sleep with him that night? With her DNA being found on Matthew's private region, there is no room for doubt here. The two were intimate shortly before she pulled the trigger, which boggles my mind a little bit because, while parenthood aside, Chelsea claimed that he'd assaulted her only a few years prior. And look, I'm not here to question whether it happened or not, because quite frankly I have no authority to do so. I do have one question for you. If that were to happen to you, would you ever in a million years sleep with that person again? It's
Hell
just another twist in this story that makes it so messy and unpredictable. Regardless of what you believe, one thing is clear, that Chelsea had two lives. There was the life that she showed the world, that being a smiling face, a new tattoo, snapshots of ordinary moments and not so family-friendly moments. And then there was the darker side of her too. The side where she determined that justice would not be handed down by a judge, but taken by force on her own terms instead. To be blunt, it is quite hard to believe that she actually believed that she would get away with his death too. I mean, her plot contained not one, but several glaring holes. And I still can't wrap my head around this photo, which was taken the very day she murdered Matthew. In fact, there are dozens more photos after it, and it's kind of unsettling to realize that, even after pulling that trigger, she just seemed to carry on, smiling for selfies, posing for the camera, and living like nothing ever happened. It's moments like this that remind me that sometimes the scariest of monsters don't actually look like monsters at all. Well, maybe just a little bit. And on that note, folks, I'm going to wrap up this video here, but I genuinely want to know what you think about this one. Do you think it was revenge, or just cold-blooded murder? Or do you think it was something even more complicated? Please share your thoughts down below. Thank you so much for making it this far today, folks. I really do appreciate you being...
Okay, and that's it for that one. The third one is, it's about Todd Cohep's victim. Here a couple years ago in South Carolina, we had a guy by the name of Todd Cohep who was keeping a woman prisoner inside a storage container. And shout out to True Crime News for this. Let's get into it.
If you really want to be a CEO, want to be an entrepreneur, you should take the first step. Create the LLC. It doesn't really cost that much.
Thanks for joining us. The identity of the person responsible for a mass murder at a local business in South Carolina remained a mystery for 13 years until the incredible rescue of a woman in a seemingly unrelated missing persons case. That's when cops were finally able to nab a serial killer who had quietly stalked Spartanburg County. Scott Ponder was the quintessential Southern charmer, a local boy with a penchant for fast bikes who spun his passion for Suzukis into a thriving local business in Spartanburg, South Carolina.
He was the type that would take $5 and turn it into $50 and take $50 and turn it into $500.
He had a fantastic mind. The dealership actually started that January of that year. It just kept growing and growing.
And it was
I'll
a
be right
family
back.
affair that even brought Scott's mom into the fold.
She would take deposits to the bank. Just anything that she could do to help. She just enjoyed the privilege of being around her son.
Superbike Motorsports became a thriving haven for racing enthusiasts in a part of South Carolina known for its wide-open roads, all with the help of mechanic Chris Sherbert and Scott's best friend, Brian Lucas.
Brian had quit his job and started working just for Scott. He loved Scott.
It was a good life, and for Scott and his wife, Melissa, it was all about to get better.
We were actually in my hometown at my brother's home, and I didn't tell anybody. I had run into the drugstore, grabbed a pregnancy test, took a pregnancy test, and started screaming in the bathroom because I was so excited about it. Scotty got a big smile on his face. I love that he knew this baby was coming.
But all that joy would come to a screeching halt when Scott showed up to his store one afternoon.
That day, I had talked to him at maybe 2:15. He called me, and it was a normal, well, I'll see you later. I love you, bye. That was the first time I talked to him.
It was a slow day at the shop.
Brian wasn't even supposed to be there that day. He had the day off. He was going away with his family for a long weekend and was called in just minutes before because there was a customer that something had not been done to his motorcycle and that customer was upset.
That disgruntled customer would prove to be a crucial clue. While Scott was talking with him, a friend named Noel called the shop to see if he could drop by. He was only 7 minutes away. All the time it took for Scott to hang up the phone, for someone to open fire at everyone in the shop.
All this happened within that amount of time. Noel said when he came up, he thought that Scott and Brian were playing a trick on him. He said he actually kicked Brian, to try to tell him, okay, guys, that's a good trick.
He quickly realized it was no laughing matter.
His mama's been shot, the mechanic's been shot, and the owner.
Whoever done the murders shot everybody in the chest and the head, point blank.
Dang.
A massacre in broad daylight. Mechanic Chris and Mom Beverly were shot point blank in the back of the building. Scott and Brian are also shot in the storefront and parking lot in their attempt to escape. All four would die from their injuries. Word would make its way to Scott's wife, Melissa.
I got a phone call on my cell phone, and it was one of his vendors, and she said, I'm trying to get up to the dealership, and I can't get there. There's a huge blockade of law enforcement, and she said, I'm hearing little things that there might have been a shooting. Immediately, I could start calling him, and call. I would call his cell phone while it was shut off. I couldn't register that at the time until I looked up at one of our family friends who was standing there, and the tears were rolling down his face. And as soon as I saw the tears rolling down his face, I knew that this was real.
For more than a decade, the murders of 4 people at Superbike Motorsports in Spartanburg County, South Carolina went unsolved. And with no leads, many wondered if the killer would ever be caught. Then, 13 years after the tragedy, in a completely separate case, a woman named Kayla Brown and her boyfriend Charlie Carver went missing. And that investigation would change everything. A brutal quadruple murder that claimed the lives of Superbike Motorsports owner Scott Ponder, his best friend Brian Lucas, mother Beverly Guy, and mechanic Chris Sherbert. But who wanted them dead? It's a question that would baffle police. last recorded customer at the Superbike dealership claimed that there was one other person waiting around the shop on the day of the killings.
He is saying he was at the shop. He saw a person who had on a leather coat. It was a rather warm day, and he was looking at a motorcycle. He acted like he'd never had any motorcycle experience.
Whoever that was is believed to have been the shooter.
But months would pass, and then 13 years with no leads to a real face or name to match the sketch of the man seen in the shop. An investigator's worst nightmare.
I think this person does this for a living. And you're not gonna quit.
So you applied for a new job and you got the interview. Now you got a mail it. Adobe Acrobat AI assistant can act as a
Person does this for a living. And you're not gonna quit.
With no leads in sight, some mysterious missing persons cases were about to unleash more connections in Spartanburg than detectives in this small town could ever imagine. A married couple with a drug history had vanished. At first, law enforcement wondered whether addiction may account for their disappearance. But a year later, a local bartender named Kayla Brown and her boyfriend Charlie Carver also go missing. In addition to bartending, Kayla worked odd jobs cleaning properties for a local real estate agent named Todd Colehep.
Hello. How you doing?
A normal-seeming business leader, Colehep tells detectives Kayla and Charlie were hired to clear brush on his farm the day they disappeared.
Several of the questions that we asked you are inconsistent with what phone records say.
He tells investigators they were only on his farm for 90 minutes, but cell phone records tell a different story.
She was on your property for more than an hour and a half. She was on your property for several hours. That's a conflict.
And when they discover that Todd is a registered sex offender because of an Arizona juvenile kidnapping and rape conviction, they get warrants for his home and farm simultaneously.
Would you say that she was only there an hour and a half, and she was there pretty much the whole afternoon? Okay. I don't have an answer for you, sir.
While police question Todd at his home, another team raids his farm looking for clues about Kayla or Charlie. What they discover instead, locked inside a Connex container, shakes them to their core.
Okay, go. You have any weapons? Got your proof, okay?
Gotcha.
How are you, honey?
This is bolt cutters. This is our best paramedics.
Oh, yeah. Okay, we're gonna get you out of there, okay? Just hang loose for me.
Do you know where your buddy is?
Yes. You shot him? Who did? Douche.
Todd Colehep shot Charlie Carver 3 times in the chest, wrapped him in a blue tarp, put him in the bucket of the tractor, walked me down here, and I'll never see him again. He says he's dead and buried. He says there's several bodies dead and buried out here, and he says that the dogs will be ruined if they go looking because they're drug tested.
We're back with a decade-long search for a cold-blooded killer. When South Carolina investigators find a missing woman, Kayla Brown, chained up as a sex slave in a storage container, they quickly realize there's a monster stalking Spartanburg County. And with Kayla's help, they're going to stop him, and they're going to close the book on 7 unsolved murders. The sheriff searching Todd's farm find Kayla alive and in chains
How are you, honey?
in a shipping container where Colehep had been keeping her alive as his sex slave after murdering her boyfriend in front of her. Body cameras capture the stunning moments and candid confessions.
Todd Colehep shot Charlie Carver 3 times times on the chest, wrapped him in a blue tarp, put him in the bucket of the tractor, locked me downstairs, and I never seen him again.
Minutes later, they also capture Cole Hepp at home.
You have Kayla in your property. She was locked in a container. Okay? She has told us that you shot and killed Charlie. You're under arrest right now for kidnapping. If you want to help yourself, tell me where Charlie's at so we can go find his body.
But Cole Hepp, a textbook psychopath, does his best to maintain control.
So you're saying you didn't lock her up, you didn't put her in a Connex box or anything? I'm gonna need that Charlie. Probably a good thing. Go ahead and put him in the back of your car.
As Kayla is being driven to a local hospital, her harrowing story continues.
I didn't know if he was going to kill me or sell me or what yet, but he just wanted me for some reason.
Then an unbelievable, stunning moment.
He also told me that a few years back that he walked into a bike shop at Anderson.
Kayla unwittingly breaks open another case investigators had been chasing for 13 years.
Walked into a bike shop at Anderson and shot 4 people and left, and they never found out who did it. He liked to brag that he was a serial killer and a mass murderer.
Once detectives have Cole Hepp under a microscope in a private room, he proudly spills it all himself.
Did you know that men are most likely to experience severe and cystic acne compared to women? That's why Tiege Hanley created a powerful acne-fighting skincare routine specifically designed for men. Why is Tiege Hanley's acne system the best?
I'm sorry, but you guys would be proud.
In a bid to avoid the death penalty and transfer his assets to his mother, Cole Hepp cops to the 2003 massacre of the 4 employees at the Superbike dealership.
He totally caught me off guard. I never in my wildest dreams, he was not somebody who was on my radar screen.
I really felt like I didn't have much hope that this case would ever be solved.
Cole Hepp stumbled upon the Superbike dealership less than 2 years after returning to Spartanburg, following a 14-year juvenile prison sentence for kidnapping and raping his neighbor when he was 15. He thought a motorcycle would be a fresh start to a new life.
He had bought a bike about a year ago. Someone had stole it, and then they come back in, and they were pranksters, Scott and Brian was. And they asked the man, you don't buy another bike so it gets stolen too.
He felt like they were making fun of him.
That was all it took to return and kill everyone in the shop, leaving that sketch behind as a clue that ultimately never matched to his face. But Todd liked to brag to Kayla about other murders. When the sheriff searched Todd's farm, they also find the remains of another missing couple near the body of Kayla's boyfriend, Charlie.
The ranch used to be my sanctuary. Yeah, not the killing people. Right. It was supposed to be the place where I go to relax and get away from people and not doing this.
Thanks to Kayla's bravery, Spartanburg's own serial murderer is locked away for good.
Other than the boy in Arizona and Superbikes and the ones that we have on the property, have you killed anybody else? This is the thing.
But while the extraordinary young survivor grapples with survivor's guilt,
Did you get to live?
How was that fair?
the family of Cole Hepp's victims think of her as their hero.
After South Carolina serial killer Todd Cole Hepp was caught, another disturbing side of him was revealed. While detectives were on the hunt to solve the case, Cole Hepp had been leaving digital breadcrumbs, shocking online reviews of the weapons in his killer toolkit.
Todd Kohlhepp's shocking killing spree. His secrets uncovered after the woman he held hostage in chains starts talking.
Do you know where your buddy is?
Proudly admitting that he was responsible for the quadruple murders in the Superbike Motorsports.
I put it under 30 seconds. You guys would have been proud. I'm sorry, but you guys would have been proud.
There was a garage and a couple shipping containers on the land. They found these Amazon reviews that he had posted.
The killer also leaving disturbing clues online, writing shocking reviews for tools he may have used in his crimes, like a shovel, writing, "Keep in car for when you have to hide dead bodies." Todd's reviews are the subject of a documentary for Fox Nation.
There were items like a shovel, locks, and he had posted all of these very cryptic comments about them. It was almost as if Todd's Amazon reviews were foreshadowing the actual murders he was committing.
Weird.
Director Billy Arthur diving
Weird,
into what
weird,
would drive
weird.
Todd Kohlhepp to kill.
It's so brazen and so shocking that it felt like there was some real psychological elements of that case to unpack, and I think it was so unique.
Leaving the small town of Spartanburg, South Carolina, trying to heal from the wounds he caused.
That's it for today's True Crime News. I'm Anna Garcia. See you next time, everyone. Crime doesn't stop, neither do we.
All right, let me find something else. All right, let's go to this 48 hours. See what this one is about.
You can't look at the water and the sea without remembering.
Okay, 48 hours. Newlywed disappears while on Mediterranean honeymoon cruise. And this here is... Oh. We're going to be here for the next 40 to 45 minutes.
What happened to George? He's got too many bad memories for me now. Oh, I miss him. Miss him every day. I miss his voice. I miss his phone calls. He called me all the time. I just miss him as a son.
Pretty much every night I go to bed, I see his face.
No parent should have to lose their son that way.
This is Captain Michael. May I get your attention, please? A person may have gone overboard last night.
I have no doubt in my mind whatsoever that my son was murdered on that cruise ship. There's so much evidence. It's overwhelming.
It's just been a complete and awful on my family. And we still do not have justice for the
There we go.
His final spouse.
She said she couldn't remember anything.
Eyebrows started to go up about, well, what exactly did Jennifer know?
But the FBI soon turned its attention from George Smith's widow to a group of young men, the last people to see George alive.
There were sounds of a fight, a struggle inside my brother's room.
I heard some males arguing on the balcony.
What we're trying to do is sort through the facts and figure out what happened that night, because unfortunately this has become pretty much a cold case. When I'm on the cruise, did you meet George Smith IV? There was a series of questions that I asked in each of the depositions of each of the boys. Do you know what happened to George Smith? Were you present when George Smith went overboard? Did you kill George Smith?
Something crazy went down that night. And I hope one day that they find out the truth.
A 48 hours investigation has uncovered failed polygraphs, questionable alibis, and a provocative video made by and some of the men just hours after George Smith disappeared.
On the videotape, we got them joking about George's death, very callous and at one point incriminating.
I just can't comprehend that someone could snatch my brother from a cruise ship, throw him on an overhead, and dies alone in the water, and then nothing is done about it. The evidence is huge. Why hasn't someone been arrested?
With that being said, like, share, subscribe. I hope you guys enjoyed this little bit of time with me, and I'll see y'all later. Peace.